The open road can be a lonely place, especially when you're driving through the desolate stretches of the Midwest at 3 a.m. But sometimes, loneliness is exactly what something out there is waiting for. This is the story of a truck driver named Gary. Gary had been hauling freight across the country for over 15 years. He knew every diner, every truck stop, and every shortcut on I-80. He considered himself unflappable, a man of logic and steel. But a particular stretch of highway in rural Nebraska would challenge everything he thought he knew about the world. And about the passengers you pick up in the dead of night. It was a cold, starless night, the kind where the interstate seemed to stretch into infinity, bordered by endless flat fields. Gary was pushing his rig through a long haul, trying to make good time. He'd just passed a cluster of blinking wind turbines when he saw her. Standing on the shoulder, illuminated starkly by his headlights, was a young woman. She was impossibly thin, wearing a flimsy white dress despite the freezing temperatures, her long dark hair plastered to her face. She looked desperate, her hand outstretched, thumb pointing forward. Gary's first instinct was to keep driving. Rule number 1 of trucking: never pick up hitchhikers, especially at 3 a.m. on a deserted stretch. But something in her posture, a profound vulnerability, tugged at him. He sighed, slowed down, and pulled over about 50 feet ahead of her. He watched in his rearview mirror as she walked towards the truck. Her movements were stiff, almost jerky, like a marionette. As she neared the passenger door, Gary reached over and unlocked it, leaning across to push it open. But she didn't open the door. She simply kept walking, slowly, deliberately, until she reached the back of his trailer. Then she stopped. She stood there, perfectly still, staring at the back of his rig. Gary frowned. "What the?" he honked lightly. No response. He leaned out his window. "Hey, you need a ride or not?" She didn't move. She just stood there, a ghostly white figure against the dark fields. A chill that had nothing to do with the outside temperature filled his cab. He pulled the door shut, a knot tightening in his stomach. He must be tired, hallucinating. He slowly pulled away, glancing in his side mirror. She was still there, a white speck in the distance, getting smaller and smaller. He tried to shake off the unease, turning up the radio. About an hour later, he stopped at a lonely truck stop for fuel. As he was filling up, he walked around his trailer, checking the tires, and that's when he saw it. Scrawled crudely in dust on the back of his trailer, at eye level, were the words, "You forgot me." Gary's blood ran cold. The truck had been spotless when he left the last depot. No one could have written that without him seeing them. He frantically wiped the words away, his hands trembling. He jumped back in his cab and sped off. The image of the pale woman and the chilling message seared into his mind. He drove for hours, a cold dread a constant companion. He tried to convince himself it was a prank, but the desolation of the highway, the unnerving stillness of the night, made it impossible to dismiss. Every time he glanced in his rearview mirror, he half expected to see her there, walking towards him. The climax came around dawn, as he was pushing through a particularly empty stretch of interstate, the first faint light of day painting the eastern sky. He felt a sudden profound drop in temperature in his cab, even though his heater was blasting. And then, he heard it. A faint, raspy whisper right beside his ear, so close he could feel a phantom breath. "You left me." Asterisk Gary screamed, slamming on the brakes. The rig skidded, jackknifing across 2 lanes before grinding to a halt on the shoulder. He gasped for air, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. He glanced wildly around his cab. It was empty, but the air still felt heavy, cold, and a faint scent of damp earth hung in the air. He slowly, fearfully, looked in his rearview mirror. Nothing. The highway stretched empty behind him. But then, as he watched, a faint, translucent image began to form directly behind his trailer. It was her, the young woman in the white dress. She was standing there, unmoving, staring directly at his truck. And then she slowly raised her arm, pointing a skeletal finger at the back of his rig, a silent, damning accusation. Gary didn't wait. He threw the rig into gear and sped off, leaving the apparition behind, his foot pressed hard on the accelerator. He drove straight through to his destination, pulling into the depot, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terror that 20 years on the road hadn't prepared him for. He never picked up another hitchhiker. He tries to avoid that stretch of I-80, taking longer detours if he can. And every time he checks his trailer, he feels a shiver, wondering if the phantom hitchhiker is still out there, silently pursuing, forever waiting for the ride she was promised. He sometimes jokes that he just got tired of small talk, but the way he grips his coffee mug, knuckles white, when he tells the story of the open road, speaks volumes. Truck stops are supposed to be havens on the road, places of comfort and fleeting connection. But sometimes what you connect with isn't human, and what you find isn't rest stop. This is the story of a truck driver named Brenda. Brenda had been driving cross-country for 10 years, a tough, no-nonsense woman who prided herself on her independence and her ability to handle anything the road threw at her. But a routine stop at an isolated rest area in rural Nevada would expose her to a chilling secret, a hidden world that existed just beneath the mundane surface of the highway. Brenda pulled her rig into the desolate rest stop off I-15, the kind with just a few picnic tables, an old brick restroom building, and a flickering fluorescent light over the asphalt. It was late, past 2 a.m., and she was the only one there. She needed to stretch her legs and grab a coffee before the last leg of her journey. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant hum of her idling truck. She walked to the restroom building, her heavy boots echoing loudly on the paved path. The air felt unusually cold, carrying a faint, unsettling scent, like damp earth and something metallic. As she neared the building, she noticed the door to the men's restroom was slightly ajar. A single, dim light flickered inside. Suddenly, she heard it. A faint, guttural gasp from inside the men's room, followed by a heavy thud. Brenda, a former MT, felt her instincts kick in. Someone might be in trouble. She pushed the door open cautiously, her flashlight beam cutting into the gloom. Men's restroom was empty. 2 stalls, 2 sinks, a grimy mirror. Everything looked normal, but the faint metallic smell was stronger here. She walked to the last stall, her heart pounding. The door was slightly ajar. She nudged it open with her foot. The stall was empty, but on the floor, just in front of the toilet, was a single fresh crimson-red rose. It looked impossibly vibrant against the dirty tile, a startling splash of color in the desolate room. Brenda stared at it, bewildered. Where could a rose come from here? A sudden intense cold spot swept through the restroom. Brenda gasped, her breath fogging in the air. She felt an unseen presence beside her, a profound sadness emanating from it. Then, a single clear tear, cold and heavy, splattered onto her hand. She recoiled, staring at her palm. It wasn't water. It felt strangely thick. Brenda fled the restroom, her heart pounding. She jumped back in her rig, her hands trembling as she started the engine. She sped away, leaving the silent rest stop behind. The image of the lone red rose and the cold tears seared into her mind. She tried to rationalize it, a prank, exhaustion. But the feeling of that tear, the unearthly cold, stayed with her. She stopped at the next truck stop, a brightly lit, bustling place, to try and shake off the unease. She bought a coffee, trying to act normal. As she was stirring her coffee, she saw a news report flickering on the diner TV. It was an old report from 1998. A young couple, college sweethearts, vanished without a trace from a rest stop off I-15 in rural Nevada. The rest stop picture flashed on screen. It was the rest stop. The last thing found was a single red rose in the men's restroom, and a cryptic note that simply read, "We're sorry." Brenda almost dropped her mug. Her hands shook uncontrollably. The details matched exactly. The rest stop, the date, the rose, and the profound sadness she had felt. The climax came later that night, as she was back on the highway, driving through a particularly remote and foggy stretch. The fog was thick, reducing visibility to almost zero. She felt the cold again, much stronger this time, filling her entire cab. And then, she saw them. Faint, translucent figures appearing in the swirling fog ahead of her. A young man, a young woman. They were walking slowly, hand in hand, their faces indistinct but their forms clear enough to recognize. They were wearing old-fashioned clothes. They looked profoundly sad. And they were walking directly towards her rig. Brenda screamed, slamming on the brakes. She swerved violently, barely avoiding hitting them. Her rig skidded to a halt, shaking violently. She stared through the windshield, her breath fogging. The figures were gone. The fog slowly began to dissipate. She sat there, panting, her mind reeling. She knew what she had seen. She finally realized the profound secret of that rest stop. It wasn't just a rest stop. It was a place where lost souls returned, perpetually reliving their last moments, perpetually searching for something they had lost. And sometimes they needed someone to witness it. Brenda still drives, but she never stops at deserted rest stops. She takes longer routes or drives straight through if she has to. She sometimes tells other truckers ghost stories about the road, making them laugh, but her eyes are always distant, remembering the red rose, the cold tear, and the two figures. Forever walking hand in hand through the Nevada fog, eternally waiting for someone to finally understand their endless sorrow. Some routes aren't on any map. Some roads lead only to places you never wanted to see. And some whispers from the woods are meant only for you. This is the story of a truck driver named Carlos. Carlos was a meticulous planner, a stickler for schedules, always taking the most efficient routes. He prided himself on his knowledge of the interstate system, knowing every detour, every shortcut. But one night, a sudden, inexplicable deviation from his route would lead him deep into the darkest heart of the forest, where the trees whispered secrets and the road itself seemed to have a will of its own. Carlos was hauling a fresh load of electronics from California to Denver. He was making excellent time, cruising smoothly along I-70 through the vast, quiet expanse of Utah. His GPS, a top-of-the-line model, was his constant companion, its calm voice guiding him through the night. Around 2:45 a.m., as he was passing a particularly dense stretch of forest, his GPS suddenly announced, "New route detected. Taking immediate exit." Carlos, startled, glanced at the screen. A small, unmarked dirt road appeared on the map, leading deep into the woods, a path he'd never seen before, and certainly wasn't on his detailed trucker's atlas. "No, no, no," Carlos muttered, trying to override the command. But the GPS screen flickered, displaying a static-filled image of what looked like ancient trees. The voice, now distorted and metallic, repeated, "Immediate exit." Before he could react, his steering wheel seemed to pull sharply to the right, forcing his massive rig onto the narrow, unmarked road. Carlos wrestled with the wheel, but it was like fighting an unseen force. The truck veered into the woods, the trees immediately closing in, their branches scraping against the sides of his trailer. The dirt road was barely wide enough for his rig, and the darkness was absolute, swallowing his powerful headlights. He felt a profound sense of isolation. His phone had no signal. The GPS screen was now completely black. He was alone, deep in an unknown forest, on a road that didn't exist. Then, the whispers started. Faint at first, like wind rustling through leaves, but there was no wind. They grew louder, sibilant, coming from all directions. They seemed to be speaking a language he didn't understand, yet the tone was undeniably menacing, mocking. Carlos gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill in the air. He looked in his side mirror. A faint, glowing pair of red eyes seemed to be watching him from the darkness between the trees, just behind his trailer. He blinked. They were gone. He tried to tell himself he was overtired, hallucinating. But the whispers intensified, surrounding the cab, filling it with a cacophony of sound. The road itself seemed to change. It became narrower, the trees closer, the darkness almost impenetrable. The truck began to vibrate violently, the engine straining as if something was pulling it deeper into the forest. Carlos felt a growing panic. He was no longer driving the truck. The road was driving him. The climax came as the road abruptly ended in a small circular clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a massive, ancient stone altar, covered in moss and strange, unreadable carvings. The air around it hummed with a palpable, unsettling energy. The whispers reached a fever pitch, sounding like 1,000 tormented voices screaming simultaneously. Suddenly, the red eyes appeared again, dozens of them, glowing faintly from the darkness of the surrounding trees, encircling the clearing. They were at different heights, some low to the ground, some high up. And from the depths of the forest, a low, guttural growl reverberated through the ground, shaking the truck. Carlos screamed. He slammed on the brakes, but the truck didn't stop. It continued to roll forward, slowly, inexorably, towards the stone altar. The red eyes seemed to draw closer, their silent gaze fixed on his rig. He fumbled for his CB radio, desperate to call for help, but it crackled with static. The whispers in the cab turned into a single agonizing roar that filled his head. Asterisk, asterisk, deliver, ... the offering. Asterisk, asterisk. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for impact, the truck inching closer. To the altar. He could feel the cold radiating from the stone, the heat from the red eyes. He smelled something ancient, metallic, and utterly foul. Suddenly, the truck jolted, the engine roared, and Carlos felt an invisible hand wrench the steering wheel. The truck spun violently, throwing him against the seat, then jolted backward, careening blindly down the unmarked road it had just entered. The red eyes seemed to vanish into the darkness, the growl fading into the distance. He drove like a madman, not stopping until he burst out of the woods and onto a familiar stretch of I-70, the first rays of dawn piercing through the trees. The GPS screen returned to normal, calmly displaying his route. His phone had signal. He pulled over, shaking uncontrollably, his clothes drenched in sweat. Carlos finished his delivery, but he was never the same. He quit long-haul trucking, finding a local delivery job. He now takes only familiar roads, constantly checking his GPS, terrified of another new route detected. He sometimes tells other truckers about a weird glitch in his GPS, but the look in his eyes when he sees a dark, unmarked road or hears a sudden, unexplained whisper on the wind tells a different, much darker story. He knows that some deliveries aren't for any human client, and some roads should never be traveled.